Hi everyone, you are welcome at Apex Biology, and it's a pleasure being here. I want you to always remember that at Apex Biology, our target is to teach biology in a simplified manner. This is a talk that is connected with respiratory systems, gas exchange surfaces, and also their characteristic features. And then we'll talk about respiratory diseases and how we can take care of our respiratory health. Without much waste of time, be rest assured that the target of this channel, if you're interested, I want you to hit that subscribe button because, as I said, we want to continue to promote simplified learning. Now, without waste of time, let's hit the ball rolling. We have been able to define respiration in our previous videos, but this time, what are respiratory systems? Respiratory systems are collection of organs that work together to facilitate the exchange of gases between the atmosphere and the entire human body. So a collection of organs that work together to facilitate the movement of gases from the atmosphere into the body and also from the body out into the atmosphere. These are known collectively as respiratory organs, respiratory systems. Now, these systems that we'll talk about, they vary in different organisms. But there are four things we are going to talk about why these surfaces are very important for the purpose of respiration or gaseous exchange. One, they are expected to be moist. Moist because they allow gases to dissolve on their surfaces so that these gases can easily be transported to places where they are needed, especially the important gas known as oxygen. Two, they are expected to be permeable. That permeability provides that ability for these gases to move into the layers that are expected to transport these gases to different parts of the body of the animals. Three, surfaces of respiration are expected to have what is called a large surface area to volume ratio, so that at the end of the day, the surface that is exposed to allow gases to diffuse into the body is good enough for these gases to easily be transported to different body parts. And the fourth one is that these surfaces are very, very thin. They're very thin. Very thin so that the gases can move at a very reduced diffusion distance. These are four critical features that surfaces that are meant for the purpose of serving as gas exchange or respiratory organs. I take them in brief again. One, they are permeable. Two, they are moist. Three, they are made of thin layers. And number four, they have what is called a large surface area to volume ratio. In animals, you can think of a fifth characteristic feature. And that fifth characteristic feature that they're expected to have is that they are rich in blood capillaries. Like the human lungs, which is an organ in the human respiratory system, it has a lot of blood capillaries so that these gases can easily diffuse in, especially oxygen, and be transported from the lungs to the heart. And then the heart can pump this oxygen with all the blood to all necessary organs and tissues in the human body. So we see that the respiratory system is so critical in our health, so critical that we need to be very, very careful of how this respiratory system works. Now, some of the key words that we need to understand as we talk about the respiratory system is that we should be able to differentiate between breathing and gaseous exchange. Breathing is actually a process that takes place more in animals. You don't expect plants to breathe. That is scary. You move around and you see a plant breathing, definitely you run away. Now, breathing in this case requires muscular contraction to allow exchange of gases between the respiratory system and the atmosphere. Take note, it's a muscular contraction that involved that allow for exchange of gases between the respiratory system and the atmosphere. And muscular contraction is common in animals. Even if you pick a small insect like a grasshopper and you hold it carefully in your hand between your fingers, you will observe that the stomach, the abdomen, you notice that contraction allowing exchange of gases because these gases have to go in through the spiracle. In some of my previous videos, you must have seen when I was talking about the characteristic features of insects, that insects have these tiny openings on their abdomen that are referred to as spiracle that allow gases to go into the abdominal segments and then eventually pass through the tracheal tubes, which eventually supplies this oxygen to all parts of their body. And that same tracheal tube is the exit point of the CO2 that comes out of the body of the insect. Humans, we breathe in into our nostrils, and that muscular contraction by inhalation and on exhalation brings out this oxygen. So when we talk about breathing, breathing is only common in animals. Breathing is common in animals because it has to do with muscular contraction of the respiratory organ to allow exchange of gases between the organ and the atmosphere. Now, gaseous exchange in this context simply means diffusion of gases from region of higher concentration to region of lower concentration. Like a flowering plant, you notice that it has a leaf. The leaves are actually the organ that are meant for that purpose of diffusion. Under the surface of the leaf, in some of the previous videos I showed you, leaves have what is known as stomata that allow gases to diffuse into the stomata or through their stem. So in that instance, leaves can carry out what is called gaseous exchange. They don't breathe, right? They don't breathe. Smaller protozoans like amoeba, like paramecium, like euglena that we talked about in some of our previous videos, you notice that these organisms, their body layer is surrounded by a membrane. Look at amoeba, is surrounded by a cell membrane. Look at earthworm, it has a moist skin, right? These organisms, in their own case, these gases have to diffuse through their cell membrane in amoeba, through the moist skin of earthworm. In that instance, that is simply gaseous exchange. So in summary, if we were to look at the difference between breathing and gaseous exchange, we can easily come and say that breathing has to do with muscular contraction that allow gases to move into the body and out of the body respiratory system with the atmosphere. Muscular contraction, common mostly in animals. When you come to something like gas exchange, it's simply movement of gases by diffusion from region of higher concentration in the atmosphere to region of lower concentration. That's why oxygen can diffuse into the leaves through the stomata of plants. Now, with this, it is important that we understand that the human respiratory system as a component, in that video that I drew the diagram, you begin to appreciate that the human respiratory system is made of so many organs that we'll talk about. Let's narrow our mind now to the human respiratory system. We have the external part here, we have the nose, which we all have, and that gives us our good looks, you know. And then internally, you go in that drawing, you see that you have the nostril that leads into the nasal cavity. Then we have this flap of tissue in that video that I showed you, that we drew the epiglottis that prevents food particles from entering into the windpipe. Then from there, it passes through the trachea. The trachea has this cartilaginous ring that protects it. And then it only allows air to go into the respiratory system. The trachea branches into two Y-shaped structures that are known as bronchi. Singular is called the bronchus. Then the bronchus are now subdivided into smaller subdivisions that are known as bronchiole, which ends up in air sacs or alveoli that are actually surrounded by blood capillaries within the right lungs and the left lungs. The important thing is that these organs are so delicate that they are located behind the ribs so that the rib cage protects this delicate respiratory system. Now, with this understanding, it is important we understand that, look, the respiratory system must be well protected, especially if you live in an environment that is very, very dusty. Therefore, what are some of the challenges that usually affect people that have respiratory issues? One, some of the respiratory diseases that are very common are things like the whooping cough. You have the bronchopneumonia, you have bronchitis, They are of respiratory nature. Therefore, if you are exposed in an environment where people are having this kind of infection, it is important that you protect yourself. And if one is infected, one should as quickly as possible report cases of respiratory difficulties to his or her medical health care provider so that they will be taken care of appropriately, because respiratory issues are very major issues that can really affect and compromise our life. Therefore, in all its own standard, whatever materials that we want to use, we want to avoid anything that will have a detrimental effect on our respiratory system. There are people that sometimes by choice have exposed themselves to smoking, tobacco, and that has impacted negatively on their health. Basically, these are matters of choice, but they do have their own health implication. Therefore, it's your choice to make sure that you avoid anything like tobacco or anything like vaping that can actually affect and compromise the respiratory system. They are so critical organs for us in order to keep them safe. Now, because of this, it is important as much as possible to ensure that to make sure that our respiratory system is secure, we have to do what is called respiratory care. And that means that during the period of the harmattan in tropical countries like Nigeria and other parts of Africa here, we notice that it's windy, it's dusty. In that instance, it's important you protect yourself by wearing nose masks in order to make sure that you are protecting yourself from dust, because dust particles contain germs that can pass their way through the nostrils into the body. As much as possible, if you're in an environment where there is a dusty mining site, it's important you protect your nostrils, and also where there are poisonous gases or smoke from vehicles coming out from industries or from cars, it is important we protect ourselves. These are practical ways we can go a long way in ensuring that our respiratory systems are protected. Now, this talk is meant to kind of complement what I have presented in all the content in my channel connected with revision questions in respiratory system and the process of respiration. It is important we take our time to really understand this context so that we can understand it. So in summary today, what have we actually considered? I've said a lot. We have looked at the process of the importance attached to the respiratory systems and their characteristic features. Now, what do we do? If you are asked to define the respiratory system, it simply means group of organs that facilitate gaseous exchange into the body with the atmosphere. Now, group of organs. Now, what about characteristic of respiratory surfaces or respiratory system? I mentioned 4 specifically and I added 1. The 4 points I mentioned is that 1, they are thin, 2, they are moist, 3, they are permeable, 4, they have a large surface to volume, they have a large surface area to volume ratio, and number 5, if it's an animal, they are rich in blood capillaries, which we say they are highly vascularized. We also talked about the need to differentiate between breathing and what? Gaseous exchange. In breathing, it has to do with muscular contraction that allow exchange of gases between the body organs and the atmosphere. That is common in animals and is not common in plants. So breathing is connected with muscular movement that allow exchange of gases. Now, in gaseous exchange itself, it simply occurs by diffusion, and that takes place more in plants, unicellular organisms, and some invertebrates like the earthworm that have the moist skin that allow gases to diffuse in. Then we'll talk about the need to be very conscious of some respiratory diseases like pneumonia, like bronchitis, like whooping cough, like tuberculosis. They're very common. As much as possible, we'll talk about respiratory care, ensuring that you cover yourself very well in a dusty environment, avoid toxic fumes getting into your nostril. In this way, you can maintain good health, and more importantly, as a sign of promoting your health, we have to be very careful with tobacco smoking or vaping, because these substances have their own impact on the respiratory system. If there's any challenge anybody is having, we're going to have with respect to his or her respiratory system, it is advisable visit a healthcare provider or a health practitioner to seek serious medical attention. I hope this is very important to you, as simplified as it is at Apes Biology. Once again, hit that subscribe button and continue to surprise Subscribe to my channel so that we can get to know how we can learn about life science and biology in a very simple way. Refer to all the revision questions on respiration and also respiratory system so that you can understand how we can answer questions that will help us in order to succeed in some certification examination at examination level. Have a great day and bye. Peace to you all. This is at Apes Biology. Bye for now.
Bye.